Welcome into One of One Sports, the only one for your original sports commentary and analysis. I'm John Barry, and we today are going to rank the best head coaching jobs in all of college football. Let's get into it. All right, I'm assuming most of you guys have been following the college football season, and if you have been, it has been an absolute bloodbath for coaches. We're talking about UCLA, Virginia Tech, Oklahoma State, Penn State, Arkansas, Florida. You want to throw Colorado State in there. All these jobs already available, and there are potentially going to be more to come. There's been a lot of Auburn hot seat talk, a lot of Florida State hot seat talk, a little bit of LSU, Brian Kelly hot seat talk. This could be one of the craziest coaching cycles in years. So I thought it was as good a time as ever to rank the best head coaching jobs in college football, and I'm going to be giving you my top 21 head coaching jobs in tiers. So you can see there's going to be 6 levels. We'll unveil row by row and eventually crown who I think is the best job in all of college football. But before we do that, consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel if you enjoy college football content. We got predictions, recaps and reactions, updated rankings, content like this, just fun stuff. And we're also going to be having a lot of basketball content coming up. You guys watched last night, Victor Wembanyama, absolutely bananas. Or if you're a college basketball fan, we'll have that as well. Any of that stuff, consider subscribing to support the channel. Any support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, we can start talking. All right, so like I said, there's going to be 21 teams, but we need to define our criteria. How are we going to rank these teams? And I came up with 6 different things for how I am going to evaluate these jobs. The first one being resources. It's the most important in my eyes. Where this year NIL, how much are you able to spend? How much revenue you're bringing in the revenue category? What do your media deals look like for TV rights, right? Revenue sharing era coming up. If you're in the Big Ten, you're in the SEC, that's going to give you a bigger budget than the other conferences. That plays an important role. And then other stuff like facilities. Do you have the best facilities? Are you maybe not as good? That kind of thing all plays a role in your resources. Then your talent access. So the biggest key here is, location. Some schools just inherently are going to have better access to talent if you're in hotbeds. Think Florida schools, think LA schools, think Dallas schools. Like there are certain areas of the country where you're just going to have better access to talent than, somewhere like in Iowa, right? No shot at the Hawkeyes, but that's just the fact of the matter for how college football works. But there's also, we got to talk about your portal potential as well as your recruiting potential. So it's not just geography. I had to fix a graphic there. Then your fan base, right? Not only support and passion, which obviously are very important, but investment. What are they pouring into the program? And then also expectations. If you have a fan base that could be considered unreasonable, that can make the job a little bit worse. Then difficulty level. This one is really big, and it actually kept a team out. I will say Auburn not in my list because I think the job is just so hard. The expectations are to be a top tier program, but your biggest rivals, Alabama, Georgia, are going to be ahead of you in terms of a lot of the other factors. So I think the job is just so hard, competition level so high that Auburn was held out of my rankings. So that's an example of how difficulty level plays a role. Then administration stuff, your organizational infrastructure, or is there alignment within the athletic department? Is there a focus on football? Some schools, a school like Stanford, there's a lot of other sports they care about, like a lot of sports that, the average fan doesn't. Like you get canoeing teams at Stanford. You got pretty much every sport actually Stanford is good at except like football and basketball. It's kind of weird. And then history and brand. This isn't as important as it used to be, but it is still a significant factor to have a successful past so that people consider the job high profile, has a reputation. And then also from the outside perspective, having a brand, a recognizable logo, that kind of thing is still important. It's not huge, but it plays a bit of a role in my criteria. So you can disagree with this. If you do disagree, let me know why you disagree with my criteria. But for the purpose of this video, this is what I'm trying to base on when ranking these teams. Unveil tier 6, and we have Florida State, Tennessee, Texas Tech, Ole Miss, Washington, and North Carolina. It is important to note nothing in these tiers will be in order. It's not left to right. If you guys watch First Things First Ever, you understand that. But the only thing that is in order is Washington and North Carolina were the last teams. Everything else, you tier 5, tier 4, none of it's in order. They're just the same level, okay? So we'll start. North Carolina was my last team in, and maybe I'm crazy. This one I feel like may surprise some people. And when we're looking at the criteria, like administration-wise, there's definitely more of a focus on basketball, which hurts it. History and brand, like the brand's there, but the brand is more for other stuff outside of football. And then history-wise, it's okay. I do think the other stuff, though, is pretty underrated. Like difficulty level, it's not that hard playing in the ACC. The fan base, I think, is there, and the talent access is something I think is really underrated. And we saw when Mac Brown was the head coach, just by pretty much locking down North Carolina, recruiting well in state, he had some pretty crazy recruiting classes, getting a lot of high-end 5-star, high-end 4-star talent in the building, and it made them one of the more talented rosters in football for a few years. And then resource-wise, recently they have been pouring in to the NIL. They went after Bill Belichick and kind of have shown a more ambitious approach to football. So even though, it's failing under Belichick and Mac Brown didn't have this high-end success as maybe you thought he would have with the talent, I think the potential of the job is clear. And in the ACC, where there's not too many other jobs better than this, the difficulty level not that high, with that access to talent, it was enough for me to give them the final spot. Then Washington, it's a similar thing where like the history is okay, like brand's okay, but there's a lot of alignment. The difficulty level's not too bad. I really like the fan base. The home, like we've seen that home winning streak, that home stadium. It's a very passionate fan base with, I think, reasonable expectations. You have Seattle there, which is not the biggest hotbed of talent, but I think it's underrated. There's a lot of good players there to get. And then the resources are fine. It's overall, I think, just a good job. And when we're looking at the Big Ten, there's a lot of top tier jobs, but then there's not a big middle portion. Like it falls off pretty quick from the top. I think Washington being sort of, the next one after the big boys in the Big Ten is a pretty sweet gig to have. And that's why they came in as one of the final 2 teams. Now, the rest of these teams were safely in aren't in any specific order. Florida State, I think, is maybe the team I underrated most. Like I was going through it, like, should I move them up? And you guys can let me know when we avail teams ahead of them, just because, like, history, definitely there. Administration, I wasn't sure about. And then difficulty level, again, you're in the ACC. It's not that bad, but there is a difficulty having to compete with 2 major in-state powers in Florida and Miami, which, spoiler alert, are yet to come on this list. And then the fan base is good, but the talent access is so high, right in Florida. So that does a lot of weight carrying. And then the resources, they've had good resources in general. So this was one where I thought, am I underrating Florida State? Because as you can tell, I have them below their in-state peers, which I thought maybe they should have been a tier higher, but you guys let me know later on. Then Tennessee, and look, this is a really good job. The history, of course, is there. Resources, of course, are there. If you look at next year's recruiting class, what they're putting in, who they're bringing in, it's clear that they have a really strong NIL team working on bringing in recruits. Talent access is there. Fan base, very passionate. It's a very good job. Texas Tech, I think, is the program that has climbed the highest in recent years, because if you look at things like difficulty level, they have clearly, to me, emerged as the power in the Big 12. When you just look at resources, they're putting in so much money into the NIL fund, a huge commitment to football. Talent access, look, Lubbock's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but you are still in Texas, so there's a lot of surrounding areas for you to get a lot of talent. So the talent access is there, resources are high, difficulty level is not too bad, and there's something to be said about being a clear-cut #1 program in a power conference, even if it's not as good as the SEC or Big Ten. Still a second-tier power conference. They're the clear #1 program moving forward. I think that is a really good job. And then Ole Miss, again, like Texas Tech, has elevated in recent years, in large part due to Lane Kiffin, who is a big part of why this video is being made. Will he leave Ole Miss to one of the program that's maybe viewed as higher up? We shall see, but I do think you look at what they've done in the portal access is huge. The NIL they spend there is huge. The fan base has grown tremendously. Difficulty level, it is a hard job, and the talent isn't as high as some other SEC jobs, and the resources aren't as high as some other SEC jobs, but it's still a very good, it's still very good talent access, still very good resources. History and brand, of course, not really there. Administration, though, seems to be strong there. And yeah, that wraps up tier 6. Moving on to tier 5, we have the Clemson Tigers, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the Oklahoma Sooners, the Penn State Nittany Lions, and the Florida Gators. I want to start here discussing Penn State versus Florida, as it is kind of a hot button issue. And yes, I did kind of do a cop out with putting them right next to each other on the same tier and not really saying who's the better job. But I think they're just so comparable when you're looking at it, right? Resources wise, I don't see either team having a big edge. Like, you look at what Penn State spent this past year to retain that roster as well and bring in some like wide receiver recruits or transfers, I should say, and what Florida's been spending in NIL. Both seem to be really well off in resources. Revenue sharing should help them. They're in the Big Ten, the SEC, the two major conferences. I don't see a clear edge there. Talent access, both have really high-end talent access. Florida, you would think, is better because Florida is the premier state for talent in all of America, but Penn State is still in a very good region and is the premier program in the Northeast. So it's not like it's a giant gulf. I'd give Florida the edge. And then fan base, look, I think that's pretty much a wash. You look at what the Swamp looks like on Saturdays, what Happy Valley looks like. Both, I think, are passionate and aren't super reasonable, but somewhat reasonable fans. Like, they just have high expectations. They hold their program in high regard. I don't see a clear edge there. Difficulty level, Penn State, I would say, is a bit easier when you look at the depth of the Big Ten versus the depth of the SEC, but the high end of the Big Ten is just as hard, probably harder than the high end of the SEC. So again, it's not a big difference. And then administration-wise, history and brand, none of it is a huge difference. So it's really just a preference thing for these coaches. If you call someone like, I don't know who's going to get offered both jobs, but I'll just say Lane Kiffin just because he's been out there. Like, if he was offered the Penn State and the Florida job, he seems like a guy more interested in the South and the Florida job. He doesn't seem like a Penn State guy. But if you offered someone, I know Kirk Cincinnati re-signed, but say he had been in the running for these two jobs, he kind of gives off more Penn State. I feel like it's just a preference thing, not a big difference between the jobs, like negligible at best. Then moving forward, Oklahoma and Notre Dame, I felt are really similar. Like, the history and brand thing's really high, the administration's really high. Difficulty level, harder for Oklahoma moving to the SEC, but the talent, both are like talent access is good because of who you are, your Oklahoma and Notre Dame, but in terms of like actual location, not great. And Notre Dame has the higher academic standards, which hurt recruiting a little bit, but the fan base is awesome and the resources are high end, but not the highest in the sport. They felt like they were naturally right next to each other. And then Clemson, who a few years ago would have been higher up this list for me. And you look, resources, very high. Talent access, tremendously high in the South, in South Carolina, right there. The fan base has obviously been phenomenal. Difficulty level, you're in the ACC, and for a while we're the clear-cut #1 program, so you can't say it's tremendously difficult, but you do compete with South Carolina in-state and other Southern powerhouses, adjacent to you in terms of recruiting. And then administration-wise, they're there, and history and brand. History is more like recent history has been great, but certainly have established a power brand. So I considered putting them higher just because on paper, I think this is a really, really, really great job. And we saw what Dabo was able to do, but it's just now he's almost chosen to not use all that he can at Clemson by ignoring the portal, by holding to his fundamental way of doing things at Clemson. He is somewhat wasting the potential of the program. They could be doing a lot more, and I think if a different coach took over, Clemson could probably reach heights similar to where they were a few years ago. Maybe not winning multiple national championships, but once again being, one of the premier programs in the sport, whereas they've taken a dip in recent years. So Clemson was, like, again, not left to right, but they were the program I was back and forth with deciding to move them a tier higher or to keep them in tier 5. Tier 4, we have LSU, Miami, Michigan, and Texas A&M. I'll start with the Aggies because I feel like it's controversial, but I don't think it really should be. Now, right off the bat, history and brand, not there, right? Texas A&M is not one of the premier brands in college football. They don't have one of the premier histories in college football, okay? That is, I'll say off the bat. But like I said, that is one of the less important factors nowadays in college football, especially when you have the resources they do. I mean, Texas A&M is not lacking for money. The NIL, revenue sharing, it's the boosters, funding, all that is elite at Texas A&M. Facilities great. Talent access, once again, great in Texas, hotbed of talent. Fan base, very great. Difficulty level, that's it is hard. You are competing with Texas in your own state, who, spoiler alert, is on the list, not yet revealed, but you are competing with Texas as well as other premier SEC programs. So difficulty level is hard, administration's good, history and brand isn't there. But in terms of actual resources and potential, they have an argument to be even higher. Like, it is all there for the Aggies. They were clearly going to make this tier for me. And then Michigan, this was maybe the one closest to swapping with Clemson. Just when you look at it, the resources recently have gone up when you look at what they did for Bryce Underwood, what Larry Ellison, Portnoy contributed. So resources seem to be going in the right direction. Talent access, not as high though. Like in Michigan, not a hotbed for talent, though I will say 3 straight years, like Bryce Underwood, Dante Moore, CJ Carr, or Bryce Underwood, CJ Carr, Dante Moore, all coming out of the state back to back years. Pretty impressive, and strange statistically speaking. But anyways, not a hotbed of talent, and they are somewhat limited recruiting wise and haven't been elite in the portal, but they have been very good in certain years. Fan base, amazing. I would say I also root for Michigan though. Difficulty level, it is a hard job. Your biggest rival is Ohio State, and you have to beat them, which is, obviously very difficult as that's one of the premier jobs in the sport. So it is a tough gig. Administration is there, but they also do have, some academic stuff that you're going to be held to. Guys like Xavier Worthy weren't able to get into the school, ended up going to Texas instead, becoming a first-round pick. And this isn't college football, but basketball-wise, Caleb Love transferred to Michigan. I don't know if you guys know who he is, from North Carolina, but then couldn't get in, ends up going to Arizona instead, where he becomes an all Big 12 player in basketball. So there is some academic stuff that does hurt the job a little bit, as well as a focus on other sports at times. So the administration, not as high. Talent access, held back a little, but fan base, difficulty level tough, resources good, and then history and brand is obviously amazing. They have some of the most wins, most Big Ten wins, most Big Ten championships, all that. The history is there. It's obviously a recognizable brand, the yellow block M. It's a great job. The question was them or Clemson for me on this tier. And look, I could very easily see the argument for Clemson. I just went Michigan, and the history and brand was what did it for me as a deciding factor. But Miami was safely in. Resources, their NIL is going crazy. Talent access, maybe the best in the country right there in Miami, maybe the biggest hotbed in the sport. Fan base, it's a little iffy. It's passionate fans, but that Hard Rock Stadium, I don't love it. Not that, just the game day atmosphere isn't necessarily the best. Difficulty level, like I said, these ACC jobs aren't as hard as the SEC or the ACC jobs, so it's not that bad. But the part for Miami is you do have to compete with other Southern powers, even in your own state in Florida and Florida State. Administration seems to be fully aligned, committed to football. History and brand is obviously great as well. And when you look at them, I think they're probably a team trending upwards. I almost put them a row higher. They were the closest to moving up with a team you'll see in a second. And then LSU, whose resources are actually not as good as you would think in terms of NIL. It's one of the reasons they lost Bryce Underwood. The NIL budget wasn't as good as you would expect from them. Talent access in Louisiana, though, one of the best in the sport. Fan base, one of the most passionate in the sport, but the reasonability does hurt this one a little bit. They're running Brian Kelly out of town, and look, I could somewhat see it, but they do seem a little bit crazy. But one thing that does help this LSU job, I will say, the last 3 coaches, and now albeit Brian Kelly may be ending this streak in the next few weeks if he's fired, have all won national championships. So there's a proven track record of success of if you get it right at LSU, you will win big, and that helps this job a lot. Administration obviously fully committed to football. Difficulty level, yes, it's high, but you also have the requisite stuff to compete. And then, like I said, history and brand, past success, I just talked about that. So that is tier 4. Tier 3 is Alabama Crimson Tide, Oregon Ducks, and the USC Trojans. I'm going to start with USC here because them and Miami was back and forth, and it's kind of similar, right? In these major hotbed cities, but who have a lot of other stuff going on, Miami, LA, sort of glamour programs with these rich histories of college football. So the talent is similar, the resources are similar, the fan base thing is even similar, and the history and brand is similar. And I would say even difficulty level is somewhat similar. So I really did not know which way to go. Personally, I root for Miami, so I wanted to put them higher. I really couldn't decide. I felt like I was being biased if I put Miami higher, but there was really no difference in my mind. They were virtually tied, and I just had to pick one. And I was trying to be somewhat objective, so I figured I probably had a slight Miami slant in my view, so I put USC higher to try to avoid bias. But everything I said about Miami virtually carries over. You're in LA, all the talent is there, all the NIL resources there, all the history is there. You're committed to football. Difficulty level, there are top tier Big Ten programs, but still, it's not crazy. The difficulty level could be a reason to maybe give it to Miami, but USC being in the Big Ten with revenue sharing era coming up versus Miami being in the ACC could give the slant there. So either way you want to go, you're fine with me. But Oregon and Alabama were safely here. And I got to say this because I know Mario Cristobal left Oregon for Miami. That was a special scenario. And if a coach leaves a job, it doesn't mean that job is necessarily better. Like Mario Cristobal, it's his alma mater. He wanted to be at Miami. There are other factors that come into play that don't necessarily make it a better job, but it does play a big factor. Like I do think USC taking Lincoln Riley shows a little, it's not nothing. Who's another one? LSU taking Brian Kelly. It's not nothing. Like, it doesn't inherently mean they're better jobs, but it does give you a little bit of a taste of what the reputation is out there amongst the guys who could be in the running for these jobs. But Oregon, resources is the highest in the sport. What Phil Knight donates, they're spending the most year in, year out, and it's able to give them all the talent access. Like even though you're in Oregon and it shouldn't be there, the amount they spend in recruiting, the brand and image they built up with partnering with Nike essentially has made this one of the premier talent access spots in the country. They killed in the portal, they killed in recruiting, like I said, all the money, and the history isn't crazy, but the brand is now awesome with all the cool uniforms. Difficulty level, you're one of the top programs in the Big Ten, and you've turned into the premier program out on the West Coast. Not premier job, but USC is still right there with you in terms of best job. But in terms of who's the best program on the West Coast, it's clearly Oregon, and the administration is fully directed towards football. This is an elite head coaching job. And it might sound weird to people who are of older age, but I'm telling you, for this new age of college football, how things are going, Oregon is absolutely a top 5 job of college football in my mind, and I think it's pretty clear. And then Alabama, look, the history and brand, best in the sport. The resources are not the best. Like they're not tier 1 resources, but they're right there, right? They're still great resources, and they don't need as high because you do sell yourself on brand. Talent access in the South, you're near Florida, you're near Georgia, Alabama's talent, you don't lack for that. The fan base, look, they're probably going to be somewhat unreasonable after all the success they've had, but you can't doubt their passion and commitment and investment to the program. Like I said, reasonability, they're a bit out there wanting to fire Kalen DeBoer at times already. And then difficulty level, you're in the SEC, but you are the premier program in the SEC, arguably. We'll see one. Actually, we'll see a couple still yet to come. But yeah, it's Alabama. It's a great job. Now we unveil tier 2, where it is Ohio State and Georgia. Okay, so starting with Ohio State, the resources, we just saw what they're willing to commit to football in their national champion win, spending like, $20 million at NIL, just huge budget stuff. And revenue sharing is going to make it even bigger, and they're threatening to get more out of the Big Ten, which I imagine they will get because they're Ohio State. And look, I don't like them, but you got to admit what you got to admit. The resources are amongst the best in the sport. The talent access, look, Ohio's not like this crazy hotbed of talent, but it doesn't matter. Ohio State recruits, sells itself. They can get virtually whoever they want. The history and brand is amongst the best in the sport. The fan base is pretty unreasonable, but amongst the most passionate. Like I said, it's similar to the Michigan thing where you got to compete with another elite program. You have to beat them, otherwise you'll be under fire. Like Ryan Day, even with this elite winning percentage, you lose to Michigan, they're going to come at you. That's part of the gig. You got to deal with it when it has all these other insane benefits. And look, if you get it right at Ohio State, we know how great they can be. Difficulty level, I just said difficulty level, sorry. But I wanted to continue with, they were the premier job in the Big Ten. They're better than Michigan, clearly in my eyes. They're better than Oregon, but there are other jobs you have to compete with, but they are A1 in the Big Ten, and administration is obviously there. So they had an argument for number 1. They were right there. In Georgia, same thing. Resources are amazing. Talent access is amazing. Fan base, great. Difficulty level, hard competing with the likes of Alabama and all these other programs in the South. And then administration is great. History and brand is awesome as well. When we get this fine, like it is nitpicking. Like, I could have gone Ohio State 1, and if we unveil number 1 here, actually, and it is Texas, I could have gone Ohio State 1 because, you know, they don't have to, like, you have 2 teams in the SEC here at the top, so you could go Ohio State's best in the Big Ten, move them up. But I do think, like, Oregon is right there, Michigan is right there, so that wasn't enough for me. And ultimately, it was just like Texas, I do think, has the best resources in the SEC in terms of what they're spending, so that's a plus. I think they have the best talent access or second best talent access, but probably best in the SEC. They have, like, I don't know, the history's not there, but the brand, it's like Alabama's probably the best brand in the SEC, but second best brand, difficulty level, like, it's gonna, all these jobs are gonna be difficult at this point when you are in these premier conferences. But Texas is elite, you know, or greatly suited to deal with the difficulty level. And look, the administration is fully committed to football now. There was a while where there was a lot of issues, but now those are gone. And I don't know if Sark's, like, what's going on this year, but I think we saw the past few years with what Texas can do, bring in all these 5-star freshmen, bring in all these portal guys. Like, it's just, there's so much to work with. And if you don't get it right at Texas, yes, you're going to be out of job. It's because you have more to work with, I think, than anyone else in college football. And that's why I do think it's the best job of the sport. If you want to argue Ohio State, I listen to you. You want to listen Georgia, Bama, Oregon, like, I listen to any of those. You can even go lower. But for me, Texas was tier 1, Ohio State and Georgia tier 2, and then you can see the rest. This is my official college coaching jobs hierarchy on the side right here. With that being said, that is all I have for today's video. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe to help support the channel. And please comment your opinions on this. I really want to get a feel for what people think are the best jobs in college football, because this is just my personal opinion from an outside fan perspective, but I want to know what you guys think. We'll be back on, what will it be, Sunday, with a recap and reaction to this week's college football games. And until then, guys, I'll see you next time.